I love decorating my house for Christmas, and I love to use neutral colors. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Jess. Today I have 3 farmhouse projects for you that are perfect for Christmas, and they're in neutral colors, but if you'd rather have a little pop of color here and there, you can always change up the colors to fit your liking. All right everyone, let's get started. For the first project, I wanted to create a really simple garland that I could either hang from the front of a table or wrap around my Christmas tree. Now, I love making little clothespin snowflakes, and I've used the full-size clothespins before, but I thought it would be really cute to make miniature ones using the smaller clothespins that you can find at the Dollar Tree. So these are really easy to come apart. You just kind of have to give them a little twist and the spring kind of pops right out of the center of the clothespin. Next, I took a length of some baker's twine that I had on hand, and to get started, I'm going to glue 2 of the miniature clothespins back to back, and I'm going to kind of sandwich the baker's twine in between the 2 clothespins at the top, at the smaller end of where the clothespins meet. And I kind of sandwiched the folded end in between the 2, and then that way I had 2 tails left hanging out through the top that I'll be able to tie onto my garland. Each snowflake needed 6 clothespins, so after I had taken apart all 6 of my clothespins, then I just went ahead and hot glued all of them back to back together. They have these really cute little snowflake ornaments at the Dollar Tree, and I thought this would be perfect to put in the center of my clothespin snowflake because it also has 6 little points sticking out of it. So I just started by adding a little bit of hot glue to the one of the points, and I made sure that the hole in the snowflake was glued onto the clothespin that would be at the top. And then I just started gluing all the rest of the clothespins onto the snowflake until I had all 6 points sticking out. Now I decided just to leave my clothespins in the raw wood color because I like that look, but you could definitely paint them or even just dry brush a little bit of color on these if you wanted to. I decided just to create a simple bow to glue onto the top of the snowflake where that little hole was, just to cover it up. As I was making these, I thought that these would make really cute package decorations too. Whenever you're wrapping presents, this would be really cute to add to a present. And I went ahead and made 4 of these because there were 24 clothespins in the pack, so that just made an even number of 4. So in between the snowflakes, I knew I wanted to create some tassels. So I had this chunky gray yarn in my stash, and I wrapped it around my ruler several times. I think it worked out to be about 6 times. And then I just used that same baker's twine and I tied it in the middle of all of the loops. That way I would have another hanger at the top of my tassel so that I could hang it off of my garland as well. So then I cut another piece of the baker's twine just so that I could wrap it around about an inch down from where I had tied the hanger part of the tassel on. And so I just tied it around, and then I wrapped it several times just to kind of give it a little bit of a look like it has a band around the top of it. And then I just secured that with some hot glue. This is where you could add in another little pop of color. You could make your tassel with a different color yarn or even some fabric strips or ribbon strips. So after I cut the loops, I found the shortest one and I kind of trimmed them all even to that shortest one. And I love this gray yarn because it has just a tiny little bit of shimmer running through it too. So it's neutral, but it has a little bit of glam to it. So I took a little bit of hot glue and ran it on the ends of the baker's twine, and then I just stacked up 3 wooden beads to go on top of the tassel because I wanted to lengthen it just a little bit more. So for my garland, I decided to use some of this white nautical rope that you can find at the Dollar Tree. And since I created 5 tassels and 4 snowflakes, I knew that that meant a tassel would go in the center. So I kind of found the center of my rope, and then I just simply tied it onto the rope. I didn't tie it super tight, but I tied it right up against that rope. That way, if it wasn't too tight, I knew I would be able to adjust it later if I needed to. And I decided just to cut the ends off on mine and kind of have them just loose up there like that. But if you wanted to, you could tie a bow up there too. So then I just used my ruler to help me evenly space these pieces out on the garland. I kept about 3 inches in between the center of each piece. And then I just kept repeating it over, so it went tassel and then snowflake and then tassel and then snowflake until I had all 9 pieces tied onto my rope. I always like to create a little loop on the end of my garlands, so I measured out 3 inches from my last tassel and I folded the rope over so that it would create a little loop on the end, and then I just added a little bit of hot glue to hold that in place. Now normally if I'm using like the brown nautical rope, I'll just use jute twine to kind of cover that raw edge up. But since that would kind of stand out a little bit, I decided to take apart a piece of this white nautical rope. Because it's made up of 3 strands, so I took 1 strand out, and that still seemed a little too thick to me. So then I divided that strand in half, and then that's what I used to kind of cover up the bottom of this loop. So I started by just tying it in place at the very bottom of where I had folded it over, and then I just started wrapping it up and over the 2 ends until they were completely covered, and then that way it gave it a nice finished look and you didn't see any of those raw edges sticking out. And then to hold that little rope in place, I just used a little bit of hot glue and I kind of smashed it down either with my spatula or with the tip of the glue gun just to keep all of those little strands in place. For project number 2, I wanted to create sort of a minimalist Christmas tree picture. So I was really excited to find these black canvases at the Dollar Tree. And I always like to use these giant craft sticks that I find at Walmart. So I started by laying out 6 of the giant craft sticks, and I added a little bit of painter's tape to the back side of them just to hold them together so that they were butted right up against each other. Then I used my ruler to find the center of one of the sticks, and then across the bottom stick I measured in about 1.25 inches and I left a little pencil mark, and then I was able to just connect the 2 dots on each side. So I drew a line then from that top center dot down to one side and then down to the other side, and that's how I was able to achieve my triangle shape for my Christmas tree. So in my mind, it made sense to just cut this like a piece of paper. And I started just going at it with my scissors, and for the most part it worked out okay, but there was one stick that ended up chipping. So I decided to go along with that, and even though it chipped, I went ahead and chipped out a few of the other sticks just to give it more of a rustic look, and that way it all kind of blended together. So probably what would have been easier is to take the tape off, since the pencil marks were already on there, and I could have just cut one stick at a time. Here's that little chip that I was talking about. So I went ahead and decided just to cut a couple more little chips out of the other sticks. And it's kind of hard to see on camera now, but you'll be able to see it later after it's all painted. And I think it's cute. It kind of gave it a little bit more character. Even though I wanted to keep this pretty neutral, I still wanted a little bit of green in my Christmas tree. So the 3 colors I chose are all by Waverly. I chose the mineral, the elephant, and the moss. And I kind of just painted in 2 sticks for each color. So I started at the bottom with the mineral, and then I went to the elephant, and then I went to the moss, and I just repeated that from the bottom to the top. To make my tree look a little more rustic and to make it look like it had snow on it, I decided to use the plaster color by Waverly, and I did a little bit of dry brushing over each of the pieces. And I kind of tried to concentrate some of the color maybe on a corner or on an end. That way it kind of gave that illusion of snow. It was at this point that I realized I forgot to create a trunk for my tree, so I'm just using another piece of the same giant craft stick, and I cut it down to the size that I liked for the trunk, and then I kind of cut some little chips out of that too, and I kind of scraped it with the side of my scissor a little bit just to rough it up a little bit and make it look a little bit more like an actual trunk and not so much just like a craft stick. Then I just gave it one quick coat of the Antique Wax by Waverly, and I used a baby wipe to apply it so that it would have kind of more of a diluted look. It wouldn't be quite so dark as the normal wax color is. Now I needed to assemble my tree. So I used my ruler at the bottom of my canvas just to help me keep everything centered. And because the canvases are stretched over a frame, as I glued each piece down, I had to kind of lift it up and press it from the back just to make sure that that glue really got adhered down. So as I glued each plank of the tree down, I left about, I would say, a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch gap in between each branch, and then that way the black kind of poked through a little bit and it gave it a little bit more of a whimsical look to it. I wanted to give my background kind of a snowy look, so I used an old piece of poster board and I covered up the tree, and I'm using a toothbrush dipped in that plaster color, and I'm just running my thumb along the bristles to create a little bit of a paint spatter. Now the reason I did this after I glued the tree on instead of covering the canvas with the snow first is because I knew I was going to be leaving those gaps in between the wood planks, and I wanted the black in between the wood planks to stay a solid color because I thought that that would help kind of pop out those planks a little bit more. Like, I was afraid if there was snow splatter everywhere that the tree would kind of get lost in it. And then I did have to use a little bit of painter's tape to cover up that stem too. So after I had the snow kind of splattered all over the background, I decided to use my stylus tool in the same color and just add some bigger dots over the background to create kind of like a little bit of differentiation between the different snowballs. And then the last little thing I did for my tree was just to create a simple bow out of some black and white gingham ribbon and hot glue it to the base of the trunk of the tree. Okay, so for the last project, I knew I wanted to create a little wooden crate for these really cute bottle brush trees that the Dollar Tree has out this year. They came out with some bigger ones than they had last year, and some of them are flocked and some of them kind of have a color blocking on them with a little bit of glitter. They're all really pretty. So I started with 18 of the tumbling tower blocks, and I glued together 2 sets of 5 blocks and 2 sets of 4 blocks. And that's going to be the base for our crate. The square that goes around the crate, that's what's going to create the box. So once I had all my pieces glued together, I just needed to form the box. So I glued the pieces that just had 4 on the inside of the 5-piece sections. And then I just reinforced on the inside corner with a little bit of hot glue. Now, I always use the Gorilla Glue sticks, and I always have good luck with these, so I don't typically use wood glue that often, but you could definitely use wood glue or even like E6000 or like that super glue gel or whatever it is that they sell at the Dollar Tree. Anything like that would work. To create the base for my wooden box, I decided just to use some of the regular craft sticks, and I cut them down so that they would fit across the bottom of the box. And I think I ended up using about 4 sticks, and it fit pretty perfectly across the bottom. That way I knew nothing would fall out whenever I was adding things to the box. I like the wood grain that shows on these tumbling tower blocks, so I decided just to do a little bit of dry brushing with the plaster color by Waverly. That way it kind of lightened it up a little bit, but you could definitely still see that variation in color from the tumbling tower blocks themselves. I wanted a little sign for on the front of my box, and I know the Dollar Tree has some little chalkboard tags that you could use, but I didn't have any of those on hand. So I decided just to use a piece of the giant craft stick, and I'm using my sanding block to round out the corners. That way it just kind of softened the edges a little bit. And then I did give this piece of wood a solid coat of the plaster color. So that way, since it would be a nice opaque white, it would show up on the dry brush part of the wooden box a little bit better. For my sign, I used my Cricut to cut out farm fresh Christmas trees. And this is something that I found under images in the Cricut design space. But if you don't have a Cricut, you could definitely just hand letter this or use stickers or just put nothing on it at all. You don't even have to have a sign for this. You could add a bow if you wanted to. So this is where I struggled a little bit. I wanted to add some ribbon around the box that I had created, but everything that I found in my stash I just wasn't happy with, and I really like this gray snowflake ribbon. I actually found this at Sam's Club last year after Christmas. I think I had found it on sale, but it was just way too wide for this box, so I decided just to cut it down. And then since the cuts looked a little bit uneven from where I was trying to like fold it in half and line it up and cut it, I went ahead and just pulled out a few strands on each side. That way it gave it a frayed look and you didn't notice that the cut was just a little bit uneven. I always worry when I glue ribbon down onto things. I'm always afraid that the hot glue is going to show through or seep through, but on this ribbon it wasn't too bad. It blended in pretty well. But what I usually like to do is I start at the back of my project and I do a good amount of hot glue there, and then I kind of pull it as tight as I can around, and then I just keep most of the hot glue on the back. Now because this was a square, the corners of this box kind of helped hold the ribbon in place, and I also knew I was going to be gluing that sign down on the front of the box, and so the glue from the sign was also going to help keep the ribbon in place on the front as well. I was lucky enough to find a few of these flocked bottle brush trees from the Dollar Tree, and I was so excited when I found them because I think they are so pretty. But I didn't like how far down into the box they kind of sank. I didn't really want them sitting on top of the box. I wanted them inside the box a little bit, but I wanted most of the tree to be outside. So I decided just to create a little bit of a base with some more tumbling tower blocks. I just glued 6 of them together. You could use floral foam or something like that for this, but I had these brown tumbling tower blocks on hand, so I decided to use them up for this. I love how all of these projects came out. I really love that neutral farmhouse look. You'll have to let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. And also let me know what colors you're going to decorate with this year for Christmas. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!